Hi, KTI scientists. So in this lesson, if you're a fan of criminology like me, or just getting into the swing of criminology for the first time, or if this would be your first term, you are familiar with obviously one of those channels that actually had a creepypasta, and what I'm calling this is something rather scientific, if you will, or something mathematic, which is called a Hooman's height. Not obviously a human's height. Otherwise, you might have failed an anatomy. So a Hooman's height is what we're talking about. So with this title, there is actually a story with this. So here's how the story goes. The story goes that Nick recently let loose a hazardous yet serious crime scene that regarded the illegal manslaughter of Junior. Now that's what I call criminology. Federal Bureau investigators identified the suspect and labeled the charges as a count of kidnapping and a count of attempted murder in terms of his criminal history. However, the issue brings the inquiry of the assumption of the suspect's height. How can we predict the calculations of the suspect's height to prove if the act of manslaughter is labeled as innocent or guilty in the process? So with this story, there are two equations that we're going to utilize here that will actually correspond to the story as well as Nick's criminal acts, which that is actually going to correspond to the legend here, which I'll get into in a few seconds. So let's start with the equations first. The first two equations, for the first one is b1 minus a1 plus y minus x. So notice y minus x is in parentheses, but otherwise, if it's outside the parentheses, then we might get some things wrong. So we might have to focus on doing this as well, and we're not combining like terms since these are not common variables, if you will. Now then, the second equation obviously is basic arithmetic, or just basic addition, if you will, if you just label it in that context. So the second equation is a2 plus b2. Simple as that. So a2 plus b2. Now, looking at the legend here, this legend here actually corresponds with all of these variables here. So here's the first one. These four actually correspond with the first equation. So the first one. The first contextual label for this one, for A1, is the first appearance. The first appearance is A1, the last appearance is B1, the first occurrence is X, and the latest occurrence is Y. So all of this is corresponding with the first equation. So B1, which is the latest appearance, subtracted by the first appearance, which is A1, plus the latest occurrence, which is y, minus the first, so that would be x. So notice I'm going y minus x for this one, since that is how I followed the biggest to smallest. But if you flip this over, you are more than likely to fall into a trap with negatives. With this equation, we do not ever fall into negatives. So if you do tend to fall into negatives, then chances are you might have failed algebra. So y minus x is what we're gonna look for. Now, as for the second equation here, a2, which is the counts of any crime, is actually plussed by the number of x, which is b2. So all of this is just arithmetic, if you will. Now notice this here. Stoichiometry. Stoichiometry is applied to this matter, ending in inches. So all of this obviously is going to correspond to this. So I'll teach you how this is done. So here's how we're going to do this. Watch first, and if you want to follow along on your notes, if you have a note packet or like a notebook or like a tiny pocket book, or not like a pocket book, but like a little pocket notebook, if you will, that you usually keep, you can actually utilize that as well. So here's how I did this one. So while I was doing my research, I was looking up those years of which the Hoomans had first appeared and last appeared, but all of this pertains to this graphic, which Nick in here is is the graphic that we're going to see here, or the graphic style, if you will, if you're in graphic design. And obviously, Nick, in this case, if we're pertaining to this story here, is a bad person. Nick here is a bad person. So we are going to decode his height. So here we go with this one. So first, let's start with the first equation, which of course is we're going to go in order here, if you will. So while I was doing my research, I was researching the latest appearance and the first occurrence, not the first occurrence, but the latest appearance and the first appearance, if you will, those two appearances. So for B1, we have 2004. So 2004 is when Nick had last appeared in like a channel in which you might have heard of, and I wish not to speak of. And as for A1 is 1993. So 1993. Okay. So this one is just basic subtraction. So what I like to do when I actually run into a mistake, if I run into a mistake, I'm actually going in the wrong direction. So that would be right to left. So right to left. I never go right to left. So what I'm doing here is that I'm going to go left to right. So remember in the last episode when we were discussing a molecular weight, we were going from left to right. So we might have to do that for like the whole thing. So for 2 minus 1, what are we gonna get? Are we going to get 1? You obviously failed kindergarten here. So 2 minus 1 is actually not 1, since all of this here is pertaining to our years. So we get to cross this out. And I get a point for crossing that out. Anyways, for the second one, 0 minus 9. But what is 0 minus 9? Are we going to get 1 or 0? Obviously, we're going to get 0. So we're going to cross that out. So since 0 minus 9 originally was going to be 1, but since we're calculating years, we're going to have to go 0 minus 9, which is 0. So that's the whole thing. So however, 0 minus 9. So 0 minus 9 is not negative 9, since you might have failed algebra if you calculate negatives. So we never calculate negatives from a year, since a negative year does not exist. So we're going to have to place some carriers, a little carrier here. So the carrier that we're going to utilize is 10, since 10 is our carrier for 9, since we're regrouping. So 10 minus 9 is obviously going to be 1. So that is going to be for that one. So now for 4 minus 3, we're going to get the same thing. So that's going to be 11 for the whole thing. But are we done yet? Oh no, we're not smoking. We're just smoking here. So for 11, we are going to follow this equation here, the first equation, so y minus x. Now notice how the y, as we said for the legend has it that y is the latest occurrence, whilst x is the first. So while I was doing my research, I was looking at some videos, and I was looking at those years, and I thought, what if we want to throw these in here into the soup pot and mix all of these together to make this? So for y, we have the latest occurrence, which in this case is 2008. And now we're going to minus that by x, which is the first occurrence, of which you know what happened, is 2001. Why did I put that dot there? I might have made my point there. 2001. So 2001. So 2008 minus 2001. So like I said, we go left to right. So, but we're not actually doing that, since we're making like a stick. So this is what I call the stick technique, since we're going from left to right. So 2008 minus 2001 is obviously going to give you 7, since 2008 is 7 years behind 2001, and 2001 is or it could flip-flop, if you will. If you might have read those history books. So that's going to give you 7 regardless of what you say. So what are we going to do next with 11? So what you might be asking is, what are we going to do with 11 plus 7? Well, we are actually going to add these together. So of course 11 plus 7 is just going to give you 18. So that's 18. So are we done yet though? Oh, of course we're not, since we need to bring 7 into the equation. So we're going to bring that 7 into the equation. So 18 plus 7. So 18 plus 7, if we go left to right, since we have, notice we have a carrier here. We just have our first carrier. So 1 plus 1, which I got that from there, which is going to be 2. And then 8 plus 7 is going to give you 5. So that is 25 altogether. So are we done yet though? Oh, of course we're not. We still have one more thing to do before we go into the second equation. We need to bring 18 into the table. So I'm just going to do it up here, since I might not have that much room. I might have been decluttering here. So let's just do 25 plus 18 here. Okay? So 25 plus 18. So let's go left to right again. So 2 plus 1 is going to give you 3, right? Wrong. Notice how we have a carrier here, since we're going to deal with that in a moment, or just 1 second. So 2 plus 1 is 3, plus another 1 is going to give you 4. And then for 5 plus 8 obviously is going to give you 13. So that is going to give you 43. But are we done yet though? Oh, of course we're not. Stoichiometry is applied to this matter. So we're going to have to go really quick with this. So if we have 43, and of course we're dealing with height, and of course we need to end in inches. So all heights in this case have a unit which is called feet. So FT is feet, or just short for feet, if you will. So 43 feet is going to go first. And now while I was doing my research, I found that the average height of a male human is 5.6, or just for the average human, obviously, is 5.6 feet. So I'm 5.6 feet. Okay, there we are. And then we've got 12 inches. And of course, I might not know where 12 actually came from, but I can surely identify that afterwards. But I think that's just equal to an inch. Or maybe a foot, if you will. So 12 inches. So now we got to do what's called stoichiometry here. So we're going to multiply this and we're going to divide this. So here we go with this one. We got 43 times 12, if you will, and we're going to divide that whole thing by 5.6. So if I grab my calculator here, I in this case I'm going to put down 43 times 12 divided by 5.6, which in this case is going to give you, and of course we need to pay attention to significant figures since all of this is criminology and chemistry and put in forth, is going to be 92 since we need 2 significant figures. So I need to write this somewhere. I'm going to write this right across here. So 92 since we need 2 significant figures. So 92. But we still have one more thing to do before we close out. So the last thing we need is just 7, which in this case is going to give you 99. So that is the overall height for Nick here, since he was actually a demon for this case. So that, in closure, quickly, KTI scientists, is how you calculate the Hooman's height.